The rain is drumming on your roof. The world outside is a blurred tapestry of grey and black, punctuated by the rhythmic drumming of water against glass. It's comforting, isn't it? The perfect sound for sleep, for safety, for feeling utterly secure within your own walls. But what if that familiar sound suddenly changed? What if a different rhythm emerged from the downpour? A knock, a whisper, a scrape? What if the very storm meant to shield you instead became the veil for something unspeakable? Tonight, we peel back the curtain of the darkest, most terrifying rainy nights to reveal 3 true accounts that will make you listen differently to the next storm. Our first chilling account transports us to the solitary life of Clara, a young graphic designer in her late 20s who had recently moved into a charming but undeniably isolated cottage on the outskirts of a small town in Oregon. The cottage itself was a picture of rustic tranquility, faded blue clapboard, a moss-covered roof, and a welcoming, if somewhat creaky, porch. Her nearest neighbor was a good mile down a winding, unpaved road, which became a slick, muddy track in wet weather, shrouded by dense, ancient fir trees that stood like silent sentinels, their branches thick with shadow even in daylight. She had sought out this remote existence, yearning for the quiet, the feeling of being truly removed from the relentless hum of city life, the constant blare of sirens and traffic, the constant presence of nature, the clean, crisp air, the rustle of leaves. It was a soothing balm to her city-worn soul, or so she thought. One particularly fierce autumn storm descended upon the valley with unexpected savagery. Rain lashed against the windows of her cottage, a relentless, icy assault that seemed intent on breaching the glass. The wind howled through the skeletal branches of the trees, sounding like banshees in the distance, a mournful, drawn-out cry that vibrated through the very timbers of the house. Inside, Clara, tucked warmly beneath a thick wool blanket on her antique sofa, with a steaming cup of herbal tea and a dog-eared classic mystery novel, found the tempest surprisingly cozy. The roar of the storm was a comforting, white-noise blanket, muffling the outside world and enhancing the feeling of her safe, dry haven. Around 11 p.m., the warmth of the tea and the drone of the rain began to lull her into a deep sleep, tired from a long day of design work. She turned off her living room lights, leaving only the soft glow of her phone screen illuminating the room as she scrolled through a few last-minute social media updates. Her bedroom window, a large single pane of old, slightly wavy glass facing the thick, inky black forest, was typically her favorite feature of the cottage, bringing in abundant natural light during the day. Tonight, however, it was a black mirror, reflecting the faint digital glow of her phone, a tiny rectangle of artificial light in the vast darkness. The rain beat against it, a chaotic, continuous drumming, punctuated by the occasional loud thwack of a larger raindrop or a gust-blown leaf. But then, amidst that chaotic symphony of rain, wind, and distant thunder, she heard it. A distinct, precise tap. It wasn't the random splash of rain hitting the glass. It wasn't the erratic buffet of a twig against the pane. This was deliberate, a single sharp tap, as if a fingernail, hard and resolute, had grazed the glass, once, then stopped. Her breath hitched in her throat, a sudden cold knot of fear tightening in her chest. She dismissed it instantly as the wind. Just the wind, catching something, a loose shutter, a wayward branch. But the tapping sound was too singular, too intentional, too close to be merely the impersonal force of the wind. It was distinct, a single, sharp, almost polite knock, followed by nothing. An unnerving silence from that specific spot, even as the storm raged around it. She waited, her heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the distant storm, mirroring the icy dread that was starting to bloom and spread through her chest. The rain continued its furious downpour, as if attempting to drown out her anxiety, to wash away the anomaly. A minute passed. 2 minutes. The silence from the window was almost worse than the initial tap. And then again. Tap, tap, tap. 3 quick, light taps. Not violent, not frantic, not demanding, just persistent, like a child trying to get attention or someone patiently waiting. And they were undeniably coming from her window. Her bedroom window, on the ground floor, just feet from her bed, a mere thin pane of glass separating her from whatever was out there. Clara's blood ran cold, a wave of icy terror washing over her. Every logical explanation she tried to conjure crumbled under the crushing weight of the undeniable, the impossible. No animal would tap like that, with such precise, deliberate rhythm. No tree branch, even in this gale, would create such a precise, rhythmic sound, detached from the erratic movements of the storm. It felt like someone, or something, was standing directly outside her window in the middle of a torrential downpour, calmly, patiently, tapping on the glass. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of frantic questions. The window was locked. She'd checked it an hour ago, a habit born of living alone. She always checked. So how could anything be there? She pulled the duvet up to her chin, her body rigid with fear, every muscle screaming in silent protest. The tapping continued, a slow, agonizing pattern that varied slightly, as if whoever was out there was experimenting, trying different rhythms, testing her resolve. Sometimes it was just one insistent tap. Sometimes a flurry of light, quick taps, like a morbid drum roll. Sometimes a longer, drawn-out scrape, as if dragging something rough across the glass, a sound that grated on her nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. She imagined a face pressed against the pane, obscured by the rain, perhaps smiling, watching her, seeing her fear, enjoying her terror. The thought was paralyzing. She was alone, truly, utterly alone in this remote cottage. The deafening roar of the rain outside seemed to amplify her isolation, cutting her off from any hope of help, any connection to the sane, safe world. Hours stretched into an agonizing eternity, each tick of the clock amplifying her dread. The tapping was relentless, a psychological torture that slowly, surely, began to chip away at her sanity. She wanted to scream, to unleash the raw terror building in her chest, but no sound escaped her throat. Her vocal cords felt constricted, useless. She wanted to move, to turn on a light, to run, to hide under the bed, but her limbs were frozen, heavy, unresponsive. The fear was a physical weight, pressing down on her, robbing her of movement, of voice, of any agency. She couldn't even bring herself to look directly at the window, not even a quick glance, terrified of what she might see reflected in the dark glass, or worse, what chilling visage she might see through it, pressed against the wet pane. The thin curtain offered no real protection, merely a flimsy barrier against the unknown. Finally, just as the first faint hint of pre-dawn light began to lighten the tumultuous sky, painting the edges of the forest with a ghostly gray, the tapping stopped, abruptly. without a final note or lingering sound. The silence that followed was deafening, a profound void broken only by the continued rush of the receding storm, a gentler patter now. Clara lay there, shaking uncontrollably, her entire body racked with residual tremors, tears silently streaming down her face, dampening her pillow. She waited, eyes wide, until the sun was fully up, painting the room in a pale, exhausted light, before slowly, cautiously pushing back her duvet. She crept to the window, her heart still a frantic drum, a rhythm of fear. She peered outside through the rain-streaked glass. The world was utterly drenched, every leaf glistening, every blade of grass heavy with water, but otherwise normal. The lawn was soggy, muddy in places, the fir trees dripping with a gentle, continuous cascade. No footprints in the soft mud directly beneath the window, no disturbed bushes, no crushed leaves. Nothing. The glass was clean, save for the streaks of drying rainwater. It was as if nothing had happened, as if her terror had been entirely conjured from thin air. But something had. She knew it with a certainty that chilled her to the bone. To this day, Clara doesn't know what was tapping on her window that night. She reinforced all her windows with industrial-grade locks, installed an elaborate system of security cameras that covered every inch of her property, and even adopted a large, protective German shepherd named Max, who became her constant shadow. But the memory of those precise, knowing taps, the sound echoing through the furious rain, remains etched in her mind, a phantom sensation. She still glances nervously at her windows during a storm, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach, wondering if the watcher is still out there, lurking in the dense woods, waiting for the perfect rainy night to return, for the sounds of the storm to provide cover once more for its silent, chilling communication. What was it trying to do? Was it trying to get in? Or simply letting her know it was there, that she was never truly alone, even in her isolated haven? The questions haunt her, a chilling whisper on every rainy night, a reminder that the veil between comfort and terror can be terrifyingly thin. The fear of something external tapping to get in is a common dread, a classic trope that resonates with our primal anxieties. But what if the chilling encounter isn't about an unseen presence outside your home or a physical entity trying to breach your sanctuary, but something far more insidious? What if it's something that moves within the very environment itself, taking advantage of the chaotic, concealing power of a rainy night to reveal itself in the most intimate, horrifying way possible, blurring the lines of perception and reality? Our second, deeply unsettling narrative comes from Liam, a freelance writer in his mid-30s who lived in an old, sprawling Victorian house in rural Pennsylvania. The house, built in the late 1800s, was a true architectural marvel. A labyrinth of long, echoing hallways, impossibly high ceilings adorned with intricate crown molding, and countless antique mirrors. These mirrors, framed in dark, heavy wood, were strategically placed throughout the house, reflecting the ornate details of the architecture, the grand staircase, and the faded floral patterns of the wallpaper. Liam had always found them charming, adding to the house's character, a nostalgic glimpse into a bygone era. The constant drizzle and persistent fog of Pennsylvania were a familiar backdrop to his life, a soft, melancholic presence that often seeped into his writing. One late autumn evening, a relentless, heavy rain began to fall, turning the already dim twilight into a premature, suffocating darkness. The sky opened up, releasing a deluge that hammered against the roof and rattled the old window panes in their frames with a furious intensity. Liam was in his study, a cozy alcove located at the very end of a long, narrow hallway that stretched from the main living area. This particular hallway was a corridor of reflections, punctuated by 3 large, darkly framed mirrors, each spaced approximately 15 feet apart. Liam was engrossed in a particularly challenging writing project, the only light in the room coming from his small, focused desk lamp, casting a warm, inviting glow on his workspace. Around 2 a.m., just as the storm seemed to reach its peak, a sudden, violent crack of thunder directly overhead jolted him, rattling the very foundations of the house. The thunder was so powerful it momentarily cut the power to the entire house, plunging the study, and indeed the entire Victorian mansion, into absolute, suffocating darkness. Liam sighed, annoyed but not particularly alarmed. Power outages were common during severe storms in this remote area. He reached for his phone on the desk, fumbling slightly in the sudden black, intending to use its flashlight. As the phone powered on, its bright, focused beam sliced through the inky blackness of the hallway beyond his open study door, painting a stark, temporary rectangle of light on the far wall. That's when he saw it. In the first mirror down the hall, approximately 15 feet from his doorway, a reflection. Not of him, not of the empty hallway, not of the ornate wallpaper, but a faint, fleeting glimpse of something else, something tall, something dark. It was just a shimmer, a ripple in the mirror's surface, a ghostly distortion, gone before he could truly register it, before his brain could process the impossibility. He blinked, shaking his head, a surge of adrenaline already starting to prickle his skin. Just the power outage playing tricks on his eyes, he told himself. Residual light from the storm's powerful electrical discharges. His mind desperately tried to rationalize the anomaly, to fit it into a logical framework. The power flickered back on as quickly as it had gone out, with a faint thump from the fuse box. Liam dismissed the incident, returning to his work, but an odd, persistent unease had settled deep in his stomach, a cold, clenching sensation. The rain intensified outside, now a deafening cascade against the roof and windows, and the wind moaned through the eaves of the old house, sounding like 100 grieving souls. He tried to focus on his writing, to lose himself in the words on his screen, but his eyes kept drifting irresistibly to the study door, to the dark, empty hallway beyond, to the mirrors that now seemed to hold a sinister potential. A few minutes later, another violent crack of thunder, closer this time, more resonant, plunged the house into darkness once more. Liam, already on edge, his nerves frayed, instinctively raised his phone, clicking on the flashlight function without conscious thought. The beam cut through the black, and this time, he was ready. He looked directly at the first mirror, his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. And there it was again, clearer this time, undeniably there. A tall, impossibly thin shadow, standing in the middle of the hallway, directly in front of the first mirror. It was hunched, its head tilted slightly, almost as if it were looking into the mirror, studying its own reflection, or perhaps studying his reflection. It was too dark to make out any distinct features, just a silhouette, a profound void in the already deep shadows of the hall. But it was definitely there, and it was definitely not him. Liam felt a cold, paralyzing fear grip him, freezing him in place. He couldn't breathe, his lungs refusing to expand. He couldn't move a single muscle, his body locked in a terrifying stasis. The rhythmic drumming of the rain against the house seemed to mock his terror, amplifying his isolation, enclosing him in a bubble of dread. The shadow in the mirror remained still, utterly, unnervingly still, as if it knew he was watching it, as if it were waiting for him to react, to make a move, to acknowledge its presence. Liam's mind raced, a torrent of frantic, desperate questions. Was it an intruder? But it looked not quite human, too thin, too elongated, its limbs disproportionately long. And why was it just standing there, in the pitch dark, looking into a mirror, oblivious to the storm outside? He tried to rationalize it again. A trick of light, a specific angle that only appeared during the power outage. But the shadow was too defined, too present, too real. He tried to tell himself it was just his reflection, distorted by the antique glass, but he knew, deep in his gut, with a primal certainty, that it wasn't. This was something else entirely. Then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, the shadow in the mirror began to move. Not towards him, not menacingly, not away from him, in retreat, but sideways. It seemed to slide, smoothly, without any discernible footfall along the wall. It was a fluid, unnatural movement, like smoke drifting or a shadow detaching itself from its source. And as it moved, it passed the second mirror down the hall. Liam watched, horrified, utterly mesmerized by the silent, impossible spectacle, as the shadow effortlessly appeared in the second mirror's reflection, continuing its silent glide. Then it continued its silent, lateral slide, flowing past the third mirror. And there it was again, perfectly mirrored, visible in the third reflection, still moving. It was moving down the hallway, covering significant distance, but it was only visible in the mirrors. It never actually appeared in the direct beam of his flashlight, never physically manifested in the empty, black space between the mirrors. It was as if it existed only in the reflected world, a spectre that inhabited the glass, using the mirrors as portals or screens. His mind screamed in silent horror. This wasn't a human. This wasn't an animal. This was something other. Something that defied the laws of physics, that existed on a different plane of reality, a dimension touched only by reflections. And it was gliding through his hallway, just feet from his study, in the middle of the tumultuous, stormy night, utterly unconcerned by his presence. The rain outside hammered harder, a frantic, desperate symphony of dread that echoed his own internal panic. Liam stayed frozen, clutching his phone, his arm aching from holding it up, the flashlight beam unwavering. He watched, helpless, as the shadow disappeared from the third mirror's reflection, sliding out of view into the unseen depths of the hallway towards the back of the house. He waited. Every nerve ending screamed in anticipation. He heard nothing. No creak of the old floorboards that usually groaned under any weight. No distant thud. No whisper. Just the relentless rain. Minutes later, the power flickered back on, illuminating the house with a sudden jarring brightness. The hallway was instantly, jarringly illuminated, utterly empty. Liam bolted from his chair, adrenaline coursing through him in a desperate surge. He checked every room, every window, every door. All locked, all secure. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign that anything had been there at all. but the chilling image of that silent, gliding shadow, visible only in the mirrors, was seared into his mind, an indelible mark of terror. Liam eventually sold the sprawling Victorian house. He couldn't bear to live there, especially not during rainy nights when the mirrors seemed to shimmer with unseen possibilities, when every power flicker held the potential for a new encounter. He still wonders, what was that shadow? Was it a residual haunting, a trapped spirit from the house's long history? A malevolent entity that manifested during specific conditions? Or something that simply manifested when the boundaries between worlds thinned, perhaps exacerbated by the raw, chaotic energy of the storm? He still avoids old mirrors, especially during a heavy rain, because he knows, deep down, with a certainty that chills him, that some reflections aren't just reflections. And some things prefer the company of glass to the tangible world, waiting for the perfect storm to reveal themselves. The horror of unseen entities reflecting our deepest fears is truly unsettling, a violation of our perceived reality. But what if the watchfulness isn't a fleeting visual anomaly or a silent, gliding presence, but a persistent, inescapable auditory terror? A sound that emerges from the depths of a dark, rainy night, not just from outside, but from within your very home, subtly twisting the familiar into something utterly horrifying, creating a symphony of dread that resonates in your very bones. Our final horrifying account takes us to the suburban home of Michael, a high school history teacher, and his wife, Sarah, a vibrant kindergarten teacher during a particularly violent summer thunderstorm in Florida. Their house was a relatively modern, two-story structure with a neat, manicured lawn, but it harbored an old, unfinished basement beneath it. This basement, with its rough concrete floor and exposed pipes, was a forgotten space that they rarely used, save for storing old holiday decorations, forgotten furniture, and the occasional box of sentimental clutter. The basement door, a plain, white, fire-rated door located off the kitchen, was usually kept securely shut and often locked, out of sight and out of mind. The storm hit with a sudden, breathtaking fury, a tropical deluge. Lightning flashed across the ink-black sky, illuminating the living room in stark, ghostly whites and sudden, blinding purples, followed almost immediately by booming thunder that rattled the very foundations of the house, vibrating through the floorboards and up their legs. The rain was torrential, a solid sheet of water that seemed to engulf everything, drumming relentlessly on the roof and drumming against the windows with such force that it felt like an endless waterfall. Michael and Sarah were trying to relax, attempting to watch a movie, but the sheer intensity of the storm made it impossible to concentrate. They huddled together on the couch, the flickering light of the television reflecting their anxious faces, watching the local weather channel, hoping desperately for a lull in the tempest. Around 1 a.m., amidst the overwhelming cacophony of the storm, the wind's mournful wail, the rain's furious drumming, the thunder's shattering roar, Michael heard it. A faint sound, so subtle that it was almost imperceptible beneath the overwhelming orchestral chaos outside. It was a low, guttural hum. He frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Did you hear that?" he asked Sarah, nudging her arm gently. But she was engrossed in the news update, her gaze fixed on the meteorologist's frantic gestures. She shook her head, not having heard anything distinct. He listened harder, straining his ears over the storm. The hum was still there, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to seep up through the very floorboards of the living room, subtly vibrating through his feet. It wasn't the washing machine, which was off. It wasn't the furnace, which was inactive in the summer heat. It was organic, and it was undeniably coming from the basement. His skin prickled, a wave of cold dread crawling up his spine. He tried to rationalize it, to shake off the growing unease, blaming the storm, the strange acoustics of the old house, the way sounds could distort in such conditions. But then, as a particularly loud, earth-shaking clap of thunder momentarily drowned out the relentless rain, the hum seemed to grow louder, clearer, more defined. It morphed. It changed. It became a song, a low, rhythmic chant, mournful and deep, like a forgotten dirge from an ancient, forgotten time. It was not a human voice. It was too low, too resonant, too alien, too profound to be anything of this world. And it was definitely coming from the basement, reverberating through the entire house. Michael's stomach lurched, a cold, heavy feeling settling deep inside him. He nudged Sarah again, harder this time. "Sarah, listen! Do you hear that? From the basement?" She paused, her head tilted, her expression shifting from distraction to confusion, then quickly to dawning horror. Her eyes widened, reflecting the terrifying realization. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "What is that?" The chanting grew in intensity, mingling with the storm's unholy fury, a chilling, ancient melody that seemed to resonate not just through the house, but with the very core of their fear. It was a wordless song, yet it conveyed immense sorrow, profound despair, and an unsettling, almost malevolent power. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence, a palpable weight that seemed to rise from beneath their feet, pressing down on them, stealing the air from their lungs. They stared at the plain, white kitchen door that led to the basement stairwell, their eyes wide with unadulterated terror, unable to look away, unable to comprehend. Michael, despite the raw, paralyzing grip of his fear, felt a strange, morbid curiosity, an almost irresistible impulse to understand, to see, to confront the source of this impossible sound. He slowly, hesitantly, got up from the couch, his movements stiff, as if wading through thick mud. "Maybe the pipes?" he murmured, the words hollow, a desperate attempt at a rational explanation, though he knew with absolute certainty it wasn't the pipes. Sarah shook her head violently, tears welling in her eyes, her face pale with terror. "Don't go down there, Michael. Please, we don't know what it is." But he couldn't resist. Drawn by an unseen, undeniable force, a desperate need for answers, he crept towards the kitchen door. The chanting from the basement became louder, clearer, its rhythm accelerating, a frantic, desperate crescendo that throbbed through the entire house. He could feel the vibrations through the floor now, a sickening rumble. It wasn't just humming or chanting anymore. It sounded like something moving down there, something heavy and rhythmic, shuffling or dragging itself across the bare concrete floor in time with the morbid, ancient song. Each beat of the unseen entity's movement seemed to synchronize with the ominous chanting, a horrifying, macabre dance. He reached the kitchen door. His blood ran cold as he realized something horrifying. It was slightly ajar, just a fraction of an inch, a sliver of darkness, but enough to let the chilling, resonant sounds seep into the kitchen, into the heart of their home. He remembered clearly locking it that morning after putting away some laundry. He hadn't opened it since. Sarah hadn't opened it. The implication was clear and terrifying. With a surge of desperate resolve, he pushed the door open just a crack, peering into the inky blackness of the stairwell, straining his eyes. The chanting roared up at him, louder than ever, a primal, guttural cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house, assaulting his ears and mind. And then, for a split second, illuminated by a brilliant, blinding flash of lightning that cut through the small, grimy basement window, he saw it. At the bottom of the stairs, standing perfectly still in the middle of the concrete floor, was a figure. Tall, dark. Its back was at him, its form unnervingly gaunt. It wasn't human. It was too thin, too angular, its limbs seemingly too long, too spindly, silhouetted against the fleeting light of the storm. And from it emanated the horrifying, resonant chant, the source of the impossible song. It seemed to be swaying slightly, almost dancing to its own horrifying tune, a slow, mesmerizing, rhythmic sway. It was facing the far wall, singing to the very foundation of their home, as if invoking something ancient and terrible. The lightning flash vanished as quickly as it came, plunging the basement back into absolute, suffocating darkness. The chanting continued, now joined by a wet, sickening, slapping sound, as if something viscous and heavy was striking the concrete floor in time with the song, a grotesque percussion. Michael slammed the door shut, fumbling frantically with the deadbolt, his hands shaking so violently he could barely turn the bolt, his fingers slipping on the cold metal. He stumbled back to Sarah, grabbing her, pulling her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her hair. They spent the rest of the night huddled together on the couch, the lamp on, listening to the incessant rain and the faint yet persistent humming and chanting that continued to rise from their basement, a constant, chilling reminder. It only stopped as the storm finally broke, just before dawn, leaving behind a world washed clean, but tainted by the unseen. They never went into the basement again, not once. They eventually moved, selling the house at a significant loss, desperate to escape the haunting melody, never telling the new owners about the singing presence that resided beneath the floor. Michael and Sarah still live with the terrifying memory of that rainy night, the impossible song, the chilling glimpse. They still wonder, what was singing in their basement? Was it a trapped spirit, a cursed entity, or something even older, something summoned or awakened by the intensity of the storm, drawn to the oldest, most forgotten part of their home? The sound of rain on the roof, once comforting, a lullaby of safety, now brings a lingering chill, a constant low thrum of unease, a reminder that some things, once heard, can never be unheard, and some songs once sung can never truly be forgotten. These stories are a chilling reminder that the world holds more than just the familiar. When the storm rages, when the darkness deepens, and when the comfort of your home is just an illusion, something else may be waiting, listening, watching, or perhaps even singing. Have you ever experienced anything truly terrifying during a rainy night? A strange tap? A disturbing reflection? An impossible sound? Share your stories in the comments below. We want to hear your encounters with the unknown. If these tales sent shivers down your spine, if they made you glance nervously at your own windows or listen intently to the sounds of your house, hit that like button, subscribe for more chilling true stories that push the boundaries of reality, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the unsettling unknown. Until then, remember, the rain can conceal many things. And sometimes, the most terrifying sounds are those that emerge from the very heart of the storm. Stay safe out there.